Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now, I think I'm going to make it a tradition every high-end graphics card that passes through my hands has to face the same notorious benchmark, a true test of performance. I'm talking about GTA 4. You may remember that we tested the 3070 with GTA a few months ago to see if we could finally max out this title at both 1080p and 4K, and today it's the turn of the 6700 XT from AMD. Generally, performance of this card sits in between the 3060 Ti and 3070 from Nvidia, but that means nothing in a game where optimization is the main cause of system performance problems. So let's kick things off with 1080p in the game's default settings. These are the settings that the game chooses itself after launching it for the first time. These settings use a supposed 728 megabytes of video memory. To benchmark this card, I just played the game for half an hour with each of my chosen graphical settings, the same as I did with the 3070. The average frame rate was good, coming out at just over 100 FPS, though the 1.1% lows made it clear that there was certainly some stutter here and there. This was obvious before we'd even begun to benchmark the game. The game was still very enjoyable. Of course it is though, because it's GTA 4, one of the best in the GTA series as far as I'm concerned. The max settings test just involves turning everything up to the highest available options, including all of the sliders available from the options menu that I know play havoc with the frame rate. When it comes to performance, the game actually did better than it did with the default settings in terms of percentile figures, so overall there were less drops and stutters, but we did see a lower average FPS, which came out at just over 60. It's still playable and very much enjoyable. It's probably obvious by now, after all of our GTA tests on the channel, that better hardware doesn't always mean that the game runs better. And I'm not trying to slate the game in any way, I just think it's interesting to document its performance with different hardware because it's still a very popular game that's very much still worth a play. And as hardware moves on, well, I think it's nice to take a look at how modern graphics cards and CPUs handle it. If we switch to 2160p or 4K now and go back to the default settings, then interestingly GTA 4 only runs with about 4 frames less than it did at 1080p, but exhibits similar frame drops here and there. If you have a 4K display or you have super resolution enabled, then I'd recommend playing the game at a higher resolution as it looks much sharper, and there really isn't anything in terms of a performance sacrifice, to be honest. It runs just as well as it does at 1080p, yet it looks better. So this seems like the best way to go in my opinion. Sticking with 4K and maxing the game out this time around produced a better average result than we got at 1080p, which is odd, with 64 FPS as opposed to 62. Again, the difference in percentile figures was noticeable on paper, at least, but in the real world it's going to feel very similar to play, with the dips being noticeable at random intervals, and on occasions when you turn the camera quickly. For me, the game is still enjoyable with this card because it's GTA 4 and anyone who's played it knows what to expect from performance. It's one of those games that you just sort of accept that it might stutter here and there and just try to ignore it, or cap the frame rate at a constant FPS instead, like 30 or 60. For those wondering, here are how today's maximum settings results compare to that of the RTX 3070. First we have the 1080p results, and then we have the 2160p or 4K results. And that about does it for this video. If you enjoyed it, leave a like on it down below, leave a dislike if you didn't, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and hopefully I'll see all of you in the next one.